From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Tuesday, January 27th. Here's what we're covering on today's episode. A walking school bus is one Albuquerque neighborhood's solution to the hazards children reported on their route to school. Now, the Albuquerque Public School District has awarded a $2.7 million grant to add walking school buses across the district, aiming to have over 50 by 2031. With more on this development, we now turn to the Journal's federal government reporter, Kathy Cook, who's been following this story. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Gino.
So, Kathy, I'm sure a lot of our listeners were like me when they heard walking school bus for the first time, kind of wondering exactly what that means. Can you tell us a little bit about this program and what this federal grant money will mean for it?
Absolutely. So a walking school bus, the idea of having adults who, have been trained in how to be a crossing guard, walk with kids on their path to school. School buses, state regulations mean that in New Mexico, school buses don't pick up kids if they're within a mile of an elementary school or I think a mile and a half of a middle school. And so, in theory, those kids can walk to school, but in some neighborhoods have hazards. And so, in the program that Chancey and I went and looked at, the neighbors themselves said, hey, we've heard there are hazards on the route to school. And so we want to help kids who live in our neighborhood walk to school. And then that sort of grew into an official program that partners with the school district and partners with the city of Albuquerque. And now the school district, Albuquerque Public Schools, has been awarded a $2.7 million federal grant to help it expand that program. Right now there's walking school buses, I think at 2 elementary schools and 3 elementary schools and 1 middle school in the district. And this money will allow the district to expand the program. Their goal is more than 50 schools by 2031.
And Kathy, you mentioned it in your answer right there, that this program kind of really began as a grassroots effort, neighbors in the community coming out and saying, we want to help out these kids. And you mentioned that you got a chance to participate in one of these walking school buses. What did the adults involved in the program tell you about it?
I had a chance to join the walking school bus that traverses from Whittier Elementary School to Wilson Middle School. And I spoke with Sandra Perea, who has been, one of the neighbors in the community who's pushed for this program and who's now crossing guard trained and walks with kids in the morning 5 days a week. And she said that neighbors in the community had heard that children were being approached to join gangs and elementary school kids were, being catcalled. And so that was part of the reason people in the neighborhood said, hey, we think we should step up and walk with these kids to school. What school district officials have told me is that New Mexico's high on the list of pedestrian deaths per capita, and the area around Whittier Elementary School and Wilson Middle School in particular is a hazardous area for pedestrian deaths. And that's one reason this program's important for student safety. When I went on the walk myself, I saw firsthand that there were several encampments that students had to walk past. And by that, I mean, there was some folks who were living in the back of a truck and they had an electric cord crossing the sidewalks that the students had to walk past. There was someone living behind a propped up mattress on that route to school. There was also, a discarded needle in a gutter. There was a dumpster at one point that was blocking the sidewalk. And so the students had to walk in the street. So there were some hazards that you may see around Albuquerque if you live here.
And Kathy, you touched on some really important points there. Obviously, pedestrian safety, a big issue here in New Mexico, and how the program is kind of shedding a light on that. Also, how the community and the adults have really come together. But my last question is really about the kids participating in this program, how they feel about it, if they enjoy it, and how it's really benefiting them.
Right. So the walking school bus between Whittier and Wilson has been around for a couple years now. I only had the chance to walk on one school bus route, although I'm sure they'd be happy to have me or anyone else volunteer to walk more frequently. And the kids on that day were really excited to see the adults they were walking with. They chatted with their friends. They joked with the adults who were supervising them. They seemed really happy on their route to school.
So the walking bus school program that has taken root here in Albuquerque, the beneficiary of this federal grant from the Albuquerque Public Schools, and like Kathy, you mentioned throughout the interview, hoping to expand to over 50 schools by 2031. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing the latest on this program with us.
Thank you, Gina.
New Mexico Democrats have submitted a long-shot bid to make the state one of the early presidential primary states for the 2028 election cycle. In their application to the Democratic National Committee, party leaders highlighted New Mexico's racial and cultural diversity, strong Native American and Hispanic representation, rural-urban mix, and relatively low campaign costs as reason the state could better reflect the modern Democratic electorate. Party Chair Sarah Adelson said New Mexico demonstrates how candidates can build broad coalitions across tribal nations, rural Hispanic communities, small towns, and urban areas, a strategy Democrats will need nationally after recent electoral losses among working-class voters. While Donald Trump made gains across most New Mexico counties in 2024, he still lost the state by about 6 points. New Mexico currently holds one of the nation's latest primaries in June, often after nominees are already decided. Lawmakers from both parties have long pushed to move it earlier to increase the state's influence, candidate visits, and campaign spending. If selected by the DNC, state law would need to change to move up the primary, which would affect all parties and allow independent voters to participate under a recent state law. The DNC is expected to review applications in the coming weeks, with Iowa and New Hampshire also seeking to retain early state status. New Mexico's 2 U.S. senators are among a growing number of Democrats refusing to support the annual funding for the Department of Homeland Security after a second fatal shooting by DHS agents in Minneapolis this month. Senator Ben Ray Lujan and Senator Martin Heinrich say they will not vote for DHS funding without major reforms, oversight, and accountability, citing the killing of Alex Preddy by a Border Patrol agent and an earlier DSS shooting that killed Brene Good. Lujan called for an independent investigation into Preddy's death and demanded the resignation or firing of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and White House Policy Advisor Stephen Miller. Heinrich said he would oppose DHS funding even if it was bundled with other appropriation bills, a move that could contribute to a partial government shutdown if Congress fails to act by the end of the month. Republicans criticized the stance, arguing it undermines law enforcement. Protests have erupted nationwide, including here in New Mexico, as video of Preddy's shooting appears to contradict claims that he threatened officers. Legal scholars have also raised concern about free speech and federal agencies' response to the protests. Meanwhile, Democrats are exploring ways to either pass other funding bills separately, even as ICE continues to receive historically high funding levels that were approved last year. And after years of low occupancy and neighborhood challenges, the new owner of the Tradewind Shopping Center along Central Avenue is betting on a turnaround, fueled by an upcoming housing development. The former Route 66 motel site, now a 38,400 square foot retail center near San Mateo and Central Southeast, is about 35% occupied and has struggled with vacancies, construction disruptions, and the pandemic. California-based MPLA Partners bought the property in 2025 and plans to hold it long-term, aiming to raise occupancy to 80 or 90% within 3 years. The firm's optimism is largely tied to the nearby Serenade at the Park Central project, which will convert vacant office towers into housing, starting with the 110-unit apartment building across the street, including affordable units. While the residential project won't be completed until 2027, the new owner believes the added density will create demand for neighborhood services and retail. With competitive lease rates, flexible terms, improved security, and a mix of local and national tenants, MBLA Partners hopes to revive Tradewinds as a community asset and capitalize on its visibility and Route 66 history. The leading news is powered by the journalism of the Albuquerque Journal. If you enjoy hearing all of the stories we share with you here daily, please consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Journal by utilizing the discount code in our show notes. Every subscription helps support local journalism and allows us to provide you with the news that matters to you. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 49, and as for this evening, mostly clear with a low around 20. To keep up with all the latest news and podcasts from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. That's the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. We'll be back tomorrow.